Hey Goobers, today we have something a little bit different. It's going to be me just kind of sharing my thoughts, and we will do episodes like this from time to time depending on what you guys think. As many of you know, I live in Florida, and back in late March, early April, coronavirus was growing here at an exponential rate. It was a scary time because, well, exponentials are scary. The idea that one day you have 36 new cases being added per day, and the following week, you're adding cases at 146 per day. And the next week, you're adding it at a rate of 700 per day, is pretty scary when you consider the number that follows. At that rate, we'd expect to add about 1,700 cases here in Florida per day. But instead, what we saw was actually about 1,200. And that was about where it peaked. It was around April 4th, and it was because social distancing and staying at home was working. And from there, the cases slowly but surely started shrinking day by day by day. We were on our way to claim victory until June 11th, when we reported 1,300 new cases. And the next day, it was even higher. And the next day, it was even higher. On June 27th, we reported a whopping 9,500 new cases that day. So, how did we get here? Well, I know where I live, I started seeing people act like coronavirus was, over. The killing of George Floyd and the protests that followed were so eye-catching that coronavirus just kind of took a back seat. But we never actually defeated it. Americans, like so many times before, have a focus problem. We are bombarded with issue after issue, and we never seem to actually fix anything. Now, that doesn't mean that the protests were wrong. They weren't. It's just due to coronavirus, it was kind of bad timing. And for many of us, we kind of felt like after the protests, coronavirus was over. And if it's over, then why do you need to socially distance? It is summer after all. We even, like so many things before, let masks become a political issue. People have probably started feeling like if you wear one, you're a libtard, and I don't want to be that. And of course, liberals do what they always do. They try to shame and mock people online for not wearing masks, which in turn only made those people less likely to ever wear masks. And those people now not wearing masks only gets more liberals to now pile on, and meanwhile, the whole country is achieving nothing. Both the left and the right make our country worse by fueling the other side's outrage machine. Right now, the United States feels like a poorly run business. We are failing to meet the challenges we face. We are having massive spikes in coronavirus. We have a looming eviction crisis. We have big losses in the stock market. People are screaming at each other in the streets. And why? It's because Americans are divided. That shows up in our politics. Our leaders make their number one concern defeating the other party. But their number one concern should be us, the people. I know that none of us want to focus on this negativity, and neither do I. Most of us are aware that this is bad. I don't need to convince you. America has been better before. We used to be like Apple in the 1980s. Sure, we were slow and clunky and had stupid ideas. Hell, we've always been a bunch of goobers. But now we're like Apple in the 1990s. Just a bad decision after a bad decision after bad decision. But ultimately, the talent and the potential is here. The issue is the day-to-day business isn't organized well, and it just makes a big old mess of a country. Fundamentally, we need a change in philosophy. That is exactly what Steve Jobs brought to Apple when he came back. Although in the end, it wasn't Steve Jobs who did all the work. The work that was accomplished was possible because of the change in philosophy that he brought. Look, fundamentally, a house divided cannot stand. How often do we hear, I don't want to talk about politics, you shouldn't talk about religion, at work this isn't appropriate? On the surface, these things make sense. Avoiding talking about politics, it may make your day more pleasant. It may make your business more efficient that day. But it doesn't make us stable. Not talking about politics leaves us no opportunity to become one people. And before anyone says it, no, I'm not talking about people who play devil's advocate. There's a time and a place, and it's not the company picnic. Putting those people aside, we should be able to talk openly and honestly about how we feel about politics. And look, sometimes somebody's going to say something that you think is super idiotic. And you know what? Maybe it is. But after you get mad at that person, realize that they have just as much voting power as you do. And when it comes to voting, you may be smart enough to realize that 1 divided by the whole population of the country is basically 0. And that may make you say, what's the point of voting? But that's a whole nother level of stupid. But you know who isn't smart enough to realize that 1 divided by the whole population of the United States is basically 0? That guy at the picnic. And you know what? Basically 0 isn't 0, is it? If we keep going down this path of yelling about everything, getting band-aid solutions, and forgetting about our problems, then we're going to be stuck in this Groundhog's Day hell that we've created for ourselves. It's time to actually stay focused on the problem until it is solved. And look, that doesn't mean we need to solve one problem at a time. We have 300 million people. We can do multiple things at once, but we need to stop forgetting about problems and actually make sure it gets done before we forget and move on to the next thing we're mad about. We need to actually fix something before we move on. Not everything we're going to try is going to work out. Our system isn't perfect, and some of the problems in our system, they just get worse with time. If we could just be less afraid of trying something new, then I really think we could make our society great. And importantly, we could make it feel good to live here for all of its citizens. And if something fails, let's change course and try again. Let's take a page out of our science and engineering handbook and do some A/B testing. Sometimes these changes will be good for you, and sometimes these changes will make things worse for you. But as long as the end result is more positive than negative, then we should try it. Jason brought up a good point a few episodes back. He said, on your deathbed, you're more likely to regret the things that you didn't do than the things that you did do. Well, right now, it doesn't seem like we're doing anything. And I don't want to regret a whole generation. Look, at this point, I wish I could tell you what we need to do to fix everything, but I don't have all the answers. This has been a lot more of just trying to recognize the problem. I originally made this podcast because I was so sick of all the divisiveness in our politics. Before the podcast, I would talk to Jason on the phone from time to time, and I thought that the way we talked to each other was healthy for two adults with different perspectives. I thought it would be interesting to document these conversations for other people to listen to. We are just two guys trying to make the world a better place, one conversation at a time. But you guys listening to this probably also have something to say. And right now, our audience is small, which makes right now the perfect time to say something because Jason and I are very likely to see it. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about what our politics should be. And what I've realized is that it should be a force to build a better society. It should be work that helps improve our day-to-day lives. We get so focused on who gets what, when, and where that we miss out on the fact that society is something that should make all of our lives better. I think that's the kind of stuff I want my audience to talk about. That's the kind of stuff I want you guys to be discussing. Look, if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, you can email us at bipartisangoobers@gmail.com. You can tag us on our Twitter page, @GoobersPodcast, or our Facebook page. Post your thoughts and ideas on how we can improve things and make our society better. And maybe we can live up to our name, the united part of the United States of America. And you can help us out too. If you think people would be interested in this, tell them about the podcast. People really are a bunch of goobers. Every single one of us. So I think it's only fitting that in the end, a bunch of goobers try and help. I don't know. With that said, good night, goobers.